Assalamu alaikum. I mentioned earlier how much of a privilege it is to just be able to travel, in the Muslim community broadly and enjoy such great hospitality, such great sorority, fraternity. And it's not something that I take for granted. It's something that I literally understand to be one of the remaining characteristics of prophetic goodness that still defines our community. I was sitting at Masjid Azhar once, and I was sitting with another brother, and we were looking at these delegations of students that appeared to be students from all over the world. And I just had like a thought. I said, isn't it amazing how every people has something at which they excel? Every people has something they do really well. I said, look at the Japanese. Technology, we were speaking Arabic. I said, technology. I said, look at the Germans. I said, handasa, I said, engineering. I said, look at the Americans. I said, sana'at al-asliha, weapons manufacturing, and trading in futures and securities. No one can beat us at that. I said, نحن كالمسلمين ماذا نتفوق فيه? We as Muslims, what do we excel in? He looked at me and he said, shurb al-shay, drinking tea. Shurb al-shay, drinking tea. Then we paused, we laughed, and he said, la, diyafa, hospitality. That even now, even in our present degraded condition, we still maintain this prophetic virtue of hospitality to the traveler, to the visitor. And I've seen that in every Muslim community that I've been blessed to visit. So thank you for upholding that prophetic virtue. When thinking about our community, and I first want to commend you. I want you to leave this session with some sense of how remarkable you are. Like if you look around this room, and this room is a pretty good microcosm of kind of the Muslim community in the United States. In terms of its diversity, in terms of its wealth, in terms of its skill, in terms of its reach, maybe the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam has never seen a community quite like ours. And I mean this. We have a remarkably diverse community. And I'm talking about inside the context of an America that is still remarkably segregated. One religious commentator said the most segregated 2 hours of American public life are Sunday mornings from 9:30 to 11:30. African Americans still tend to go to African American churches. White Americans still tend to go to white American churches. We actually have communities that have an appreciable degree of diversity, an appreciable degree of even difference of opinion in the exponents of Islam that we practice. All of this is a blessing. When you look at the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I want you to focus on the Meccan phase of his seerah. What kept his adversaries at bay? Why weren't they able to just assassinate the Prophet alaihi wasallam? They only tried that at the end, right before the hijrah. It was because of his membership in Quraysh. It was because of the Arab value of Asabiyyah, this usness, that for Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, yes, my religious conviction is different from that of my nephew, but he is still one of us. And as long as I'm alive, nothing is going to happen to him. That assassination attempt only occurred after the death of Abu Talib. As long as I'm alive, nobody's touching him. That's red light. He's off limits. The Muslim community in America has a similar kind of cultural legitimacy through the African American Muslim community. If anybody was going to qualify as our Quraysh, it would be the African American community. These are people that have a natural affinity to Islam, a natural relationship and history with Muslim communities. Someone told me that after 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center, that a group of Christian leaders representing different denominations were sitting around, and one white American Christian said, "What can we do to reach out to our Muslim neighbors so that they feel a part of us, especially now?" And someone said that the Reverend Al Sharpton said, "Reach out to our Muslim neighbors. Who amongst us doesn't have a Muslim relative, a family member, an uncle, a nephew, a cousin? Muslims are already a part of us." See, African Americans can say that. Muslims are a part of the fabric of that community. And if we invested in our relationship with that community, and by investment, I mean a relationship of mutual concern, mutual benefit, you would have this community going to bat for the Muslim community. Unfortunately, some of the things that we've done in those communities has eroded the state of that relationship. Not only have we not invested in that relationship, we voluntarily destroyed that relationship. So our community has great opportunity. And I think that what we lack is a sense of mission. You know, one of our mashayikh at Azhar, he used to say, "صاحب الرسالة أقوى من صاحب العلم." A man or woman of mission is stronger than a man or woman who merely has knowledge. What is your purpose? What do we want? If the only thing we want from America is to enjoy its amenities, its creature comforts, to see our children enrolled in prestigious colleges, then to some degree you're already succeeding. But if you want more than that, we have a long way to go. I remember once I was giving a lecture in Boston. And as I was speaking, there was a man in the front row and he was weeping. And you know, speakers have egos too. So when I saw him weeping, I thought to myself, man, I'm really on today, man. That thing is flowing. Yeah, that thing is flowing today. So when I went to speak to him afterward, I said, I could tell that you were really moved by my remarks this evening. He said, "What? I didn't hear anything you said." And I was like, "SubhanAllah, this is awkward." He said, "You know, it's just that when I come to lectures like this and I see young people learning the religion, I think about Abdullah, my son. You know, when he was younger, his mother and I pushed him to be a distinguished student. We gave him the sense that it was Harvard or MIT. This is all we were going to accept. Nothing else was going to be good enough. And to our delight, he actually matriculated into MIT. It was the happiest day of our lives. And then 2 years after being there, he came home and he told his mother and I that he didn't believe in Allah anymore. And that was the worst day of our lives. And only then did I rethink my priorities. What was I doing in America? What system of values was I modeling for my family that I would find him to be a great success because he matriculated into a fancy university, but I never invested in his Islamic education. I never invested in his Islamic cultivation. I never invested in even his Islamic identity. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we want? Do we want to just be a part of the dominant culture? We're seeking this kind of very crass need to be validated by the dominant culture. And if they don't validate us, we feel as though we don't have any value. You have communities of people that they don't have anything against Islam or Muslims. And if you showed up in those communities with an intention to help people, serve people, just fellowship with people, they would welcome you with open arms. And it's very important for us to recognize all of America is hurting. All of America is hurting. From the housing project to the gated community. Just listen to people tell you what's going on behind that gate. Recreational drug use, moral relativism, amorality, right? America is hurting. But starting with the dispossessed, starting with the disenfranchised, starting with the people that have less investments in the preservation of the status quo, this is just intelligent. This is the sunnah not only of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but all of the anbiya. Right? One of the things that made people like Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu, one of the things that made them so remarkable is that they were wealthy. That they had a lot to lose materially through embracing the truth. But people like Khabbab, people like Bilal, people like Ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhum jami'an, they had nothing to lose in embracing the truth. Quraysh even said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, we might be willing to consider this proposition you make to us about Islam, but Bilal, Ibn Mas'ud, Khabbab, these lowly people, tell them to get away. And then we can come down and we can talk. And it's mentioned in Ibn Hisham's seerah that the Prophet ﷺ was considering this. Not because the Prophet was an elitist, but he thought, well, if these prominent people accept Islam, this was the reasoning of the Prophet ﷺ, if socially prominent people accept Islam, then the less prominent people are going to follow. So maybe something can be worked out. God sent him revelation. وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. No, be patient with those people, with you, seeking the face of their Lord by day and by night. The asbab al-nuzul of that ayah was this story. That the Prophet was considering saying, you know what? Maybe that's a good idea. And Allah said, no, that's not it. The same thing with the story of Abdullah ibn Maktoum. Abasa wa tawalla. Again, somebody prominent is there. The Prophet is attempting to give him dawah. Right? Abdullah ibn Maktoum, he's blind and he's poor. He comes to the Prophet ﷺ, these people aren't listening to you. But I'm ready to listen to you. Tell me about Islam. Abasa wa tawalla. The Prophet turned away in annoyance, like, can't you see I'm talking to somebody prominent? I'm talking to a person of stature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down ayat that had itab in them. He reprimanded the Prophet ﷺ. And this is not a sin, this is what we call zallah. Just a mistake. That this is a dhikr for anyone who wants to listen. When will our community take the example of these stories? You have people who are ready to listen to you. Abdullah ibn Maktoum is asking you right now, American Muslim community, hey, tell me about Islam. I'm here. And what are we doing? Abasa wa tawalla. I'm trying to get the validation, the acceptance of these people. This is a mistake. this is a mistake. And it might be a well-meaning mistake, but it's still a mistake. And I think if we are to become a community of mission, we have to make very clear our alliance with the have-nots in this country, the less fortunate in this country. Those the Bible refers to as the least of these in this country. And this doesn't mean that we can't enjoy our success, and no, we should. But in terms of who we're concerned about, who we see ourselves as being allied with, it is always those that are being overlooked by the status quo. We're here for you, right? How can we help you? How can we serve you? This is what we're about as a Muslim community. You know, when I lived in Egypt, I worked as a translator on the tafsir of Sheikh al-Sha'rawi, Muhammad Mutawalli al-Sha'rawi. Wallahi, ya lahu min al-abqariyah. Ya lahu min al-abqariyah. I worked as a translator on his tafsir. He said something in this tafsir that was really mind-blowing. He said, people like Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab and Utbah and Shayba, the Dawat of Quraysh, the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, they understood La ilaha illallah much deeper, or much more deeply than we understand La ilaha illallah. When we say La ilaha illallah, there's nothing worthy of worship except God, we are thinking about a theological credo. There's nothing worthy of worship except God. He said these people had no concern about aqeedah. They understood that La ilaha illallah entailed the complete disruption of their status quo. And this is what they fought. No. We're too invested in a system that elevates us. And then Sheikh al-Sha'rawi said, the true da'i, the true caller to Allah, in any circumstance, has to locate the linchpin of kufr in his or her society. And that is where you agitate. That is where you poke, right? That is where you agitate. He said when the Prophet ﷺ said La ilaha illallah in Mecca, there was no more disruptive thing that could have been said. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said if any da'i is going to have a mission, you have to think, what is that disruptive thing that can be said in my society that will really stop and make people engage? Now, if we stood out and we said, there's nothing worthy of worship except God, maybe some people would stop to engage us. And I'm no expert in Christology, but even people that worship a triune God, many of them think they worship one God. Right? If we said there's nothing worthy of worship except God, without any sharh, without any commentary, many of them would say, yeah, of course. Might not even stop traffic. We should only worship God. But if we talked about the human value of people that have been socially neglected in this country, if we talked about the distribution of wealth being unethical in this country, if we talked about the plummeting value of labor in this country, everybody would stop and say, hey, what are you saying? And then we rooted that, the correction of those maladies, to prophetic principles. Everybody would say, hey, man, what are you saying? This is what we have to find as a community. What is our mission? What do we want? What is our message that will stop people and make them engage? That will give them the impression that something here has gone terribly wrong. Now, you also have chapters of the Quran like Quraysh. You have to remind people of their virtues, the favor of God upon them. You know, I don't want anyone to misunderstand from this that I don't like the United States of America. I say unapologetically, I love the United States of America. This is my home. You know, it's weird whenever people talk about the U.S., I think that because there is so much what's called jingoism, so much cheap patriotism, love it or leave it, and America first, it makes all of us uncomfortable. But when I talk about America, I'm not talking about American foreign policy. I'm not talking about the federal government. I'm talking about a shared subjectivity that we identify as home. The Prophet, ﷺ, he never disliked the people of Mecca, but he was unafraid of calling them out for their iniquity and their sin. I'm not saying this because I dislike you. If you want to launch that kind of wholesale critique of your society, it can only be done as an insider. You can't do it as an outsider. See, imagine one of you coming to my family reunion and saying to me, hey, Ubay, let me tell you the problem with your family. You'd be lucky to make it out of there. I'm gonna say, hey, y'all, hey, man, he about to tell us what's wrong with us. My uncles, my cousins, yeah, go ahead and tell us. Yeah, we listening. But imagine me saying to the members of my family, you know, man, I love our family. I love many of our traditions. But there are some things that we need to address. There are some things that we need to check. Some things we need to change. They might listen to me. Because I'm speaking as what? An insider to the family. I'm not saying, when we talk about America, when I talk about America, I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about us. These are problems that we have. This is how we should feel connected to our neighbors. So I'm talking about having a sense of mission, having a voice that is critical, but from inside.